That was a good one. That was. Welcome to the Rotary Club of Toledo. Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here for an exciting presentation today. And again, I'll continue to say it. Thanks to everybody who, without me nudging them, came and sat up at the front. Thank you for that. Every week, we're going to be less and less like the Catholic Church, and we're going to fill this front row first. It's going to happen. At this time, I would like to invite new member Dr. Tracy Perryman to the podium to lead us in a reflection and the Pledge of Allegiance.
Good afternoon, everyone, and let us begin. May those assembled here today enjoy the many offerings of Rotary. May we abide by the rules we have established, those of trust, fellowship, and ethics, and may we place service above self in our daily endeavors. And may we always test ourselves in our efforts to be sure they are the truth, good for all concerned, and a benefit to mankind, and also provide peace and understanding. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As we begin our meeting, I would like to thank Browning Kuzno Corporation as this month's sponsor and Rotarian Brent Kuzno. I'm hoping all of you texted him last week to tell him we were talking about him, and I saw he's in the room this week. So, Brent, thank you very much for your support. If you have guests in attendance, we invite you to come to the floor mic to introduce your guests.
Good afternoon, President Kevin. I have with me today my sister who lives in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and she has had a career that has included the Smithsonian, the Nature Conservancy, and the College of William and Mary, and she's in visiting.
Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon. I have Mackenzie Abodili with us. She's been doing some graphic design work for us at Sunshine Communities, a recent graduate of Miami University, and also looking for some full-time stuff. So I highly recommend her.
All right. Mackenzie, love and honor. Welcome.
Hello, President Kevin. Today I have Sandra Irvine, who is the Executive Director at Inspiration Kitchen over at Lot Industries, using their commercial kitchen to use kitchen techniques and food culinary arts in order to give people workforce development skills for those with barriers re-entering the marketplace.
Awesome. Sandra, thank you for being here.
Hi, President Kevin. I have two guests with me. I have Martha Vetter, who's founder and trustee of Chicks for Charity, and Mona Schauscher, who is the executive director of Chicks for Charity. And this year, all of the fundraising and fun efforts the Chicks are doing benefit Hope Toledo.
Awesome. Martha, Mona, thank you for being here.
All right. Hi, President Kevin. With me today is a guest from Ottawa Hills. It is our Director of Development, Erica Silk. We're excited to be here today to cheer on and continue to be grateful for an Ottawa Hills grad, Pete Kadens, class of 96, who's always doing some amazing things for our community, so we couldn't miss this one. So glad to have Erica here with us today. Thank you.
Erica, welcome.
President Kevin, I'd like to introduce the new Vice President for Advancement at Lourdes University, Mr. Scott Wills.
Hey, Scott. Welcome to Toledo.
President Kevin, I have the distinct honor to welcome the Hope Toledo team here as a part of today's presentation. So we have Miss Serena Cox, we have Miss Shauna Woody, and then my own mother, Miss Elisa Hushage. So let's give them a big round.
Thank you for being here.
Hi, I'm Pat Appold, and this is my eldest, John. We're both involved at Maumee Bay Brewing. He does most of everything.
Hey, John, thanks for being here.
Hello, President Kevin. I wanted to introduce my colleague and friend from Communique, Sydney Davis. She's an account executive on the public relations team at our agency. Thrilled to have her here today.
Awesome. Sydney, thank you for being here.
Hi, I'm Matthew Ward, and I wanted to introduce my guest today. I brought Mr. Eric Trim with us today. He is the owner of Oliver's Twist LLC Home Remodeling, and he is also a community liaison for Sky Point Recovery Services. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Good morning, Mr. President. I brought Tara Minifield with me, and she's with Cornerstone Giving, which does senior living for older people. Thank you.
Awesome. Josh, thank you. Tara, thanks for being here.
Morning, President Kevin. This is Rashad Humes, who is our partner manager at Toledo tomorrow. I think back at Rotary for his second time, but certainly wanted to come here and be inspired by folks who have been doing great things and inspiring this community.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for being here. I love seeing all the guests that are here. Thank you for sharing the gift of Rotary today. At this time, I will invite Kelly Trame, Adam Cassie, and Brooke Schlageter to come to the podium. We've got a couple of committee announcements and club announcements.
Good morning, Rotary. I am really excited, or maybe afternoon, excited to announce we have a Women in Rotary gathering on August 21st. It's going to be hosted at Luck Landscapings in partnership with Becky Schnabel from Inspired Pint. Please take a moment and scan the QR code. I hope you can come out. It's going to be a lot of fun. We have some special giveaways and special prizes and recognition. If you have any questions, let me know. Thanks.
Kelly, did you say it's at Casual Pond?
Oh, sorry. It is at Luck Landscaping, in case I didn't make that clear.
Okay. Perfect.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Brooke Schlageter, and I am the head or the chair of the International Services Committee. We are working with a very special organization, Toledo Helps Ukraine. This is Ilana, the president of Toledo Helps Ukraine. And we are doing a collection and collaborating with them on their Pallets for Purpose initiative. This is an initiative that is going to send over much needed supplies to Ukraine. There's a shipment going in September. So these are the items that are needed. If you are interested in helping out, there are 3 ways you can do that. The first way is if you are part of a business that creates or uses these supplies, you are welcome to sponsor a pallet or adopt a pallet, however you want to think of it, and send over the supplies on behalf of your business. The other option is to donate monetarily. As you can imagine, it gets pretty expensive shipping things to Ukraine. So any help that way would be much appreciated. And lastly, Rotary is going to pack a pallet on behalf of this organization. So outside in the hallway, you will see donation boxes. You are welcome to bring them to the Monday meeting. You can also take them to the Rotary office, which is in the Bell Building. Email Jackie first if you're going to do that. If you need additional information, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. If you don't know how to contact me, contact Jackie. She knows where to find me. Thank you.
I just want to make sure we all aware that the items that ship to Ukraine are all purchased here. So we simultaneously not only help people to live through the day in Ukraine, but also helping our beautiful country to continue going. So thank you so much for all participants, and you know how to find me. If not, just listen this accent somewhere, and I'll happy to lead you through how it's not that difficult, and it's cheaper than going to Europe and purchase items there. Thank you so much. Enjoy your lunch.
As you know, the Environmental Committee has been doing the Toledo Litter League throughout the summer. It is a competitive litter cleanup that has been getting us out and about doing litter cleanups throughout the area. At our last cleanup at the Service Above Self Day, we did collect 13 bags of garbage, 1 tire, and 1 TV. An estimated 390, maybe 400 pounds of litter was collected. We have 2 more that were scheduled for the rest of this month. The next one was supposed to be on a Saturday, but we've decided Saturdays are kind of hard for everybody to make. So we are canceling the one on Saturday. If you were planning on coming, you're not off the hook. We are asking everybody, if you are able to, maybe do a litter cleanup around your neighborhood, around your place of business instead of the Saturday cleanup. So if you're interested, if you're able to, if you walk the dog and see litter, go ahead and on your way out today, there are bags that you can pick up. There are a number of litter tongs. I do want those back if you take a litter tong. And there are lots of gloves. I don't need the bags or the gloves back. If you do pick up litter, just work the litter into your own trash at home, put it in your own dumpster at home, and just let me know. If you picked up a bag, a half bag, take a picture of it, text me, email me, look up on DACDB and find my contact information if you don't have it, and then we will count it towards our team's score. We are currently in 3rd place in our division. We need 31 more bags to get to 2nd place. And we do have 1 more big cleanup scheduled that is going to be on the 27th. It is from 3 to 5. It is going to be at our new city park, if you have not heard of it. It is currently called Pen 7. That may change. It is just north of town, and this will be kind of your sneak peek to look in there and see what the new city park is going to look like and help us clean it up before we open it up to the public. It is kind of an exciting opportunity to go and clean it up, make it look nice. I hear there might be a fire truck or a Jeep that has something on tap that might show up. So keep that in mind. And even though Kevin's up here, I'll mention, if lots of us show up and lots of us drink, it costs Kevin lots of money since he's donating his time and his vehicle to come. So lots of people come, enjoy making our city look more beautiful and having a drink.
I appreciate Adam delivered that as though costing me a lot of money was a bad thing, but in this particular case, let's make this hurt. So, all right, at this time, I will invite President-elect Scott Hinshaw to the podium for an update on our foundation grant cycle.
Thank you, President Kevin. All right, so as your president-elect, I'm also chair of the Foundation Advisory Committee, and on July 31st, our first cycle of grant applications just closed. So now what will happen is GTCF will take those grant applications and ship them over to us, and then Jackie will get them to the committees, especially the committee chairs, and the committee chairs will start contacting their committees, and every member who wants to participate needs to participate in the grant process, the site visit process. So now is a great time to join a committee, a service committee. If there's something that interests you in the club, please sign up now because those site visits will start, and this will give you the opportunity. It's one of 2 opportunities because we only have 2 grant cycles this year, okay? So this would be a great time to be able to sign up and be a part of the nearly $250,000 that our foundation gives out to grant applicants every single year. So please participate. Thank you.
I will reiterate, when we sit around the FAC table, it is heartbreaking when we hear that there were grants that were tabled because the committee wasn't able to do the site visits to get them approved. And we've got Rotarians that are doing 2 and 3 site visits themselves. The reality is, if everybody lifts just a little bit, we can get this done, and the committee certainly needs your help. And it is among the most rewarding things you can do in the club is to go meet with an organization to find out what their need is and bring that back to Rotary and be able to say, here's how we can make a difference. So I will second what Scott said about joining the committee and helping out. We had some Rotarians in the news that we want to celebrate. First of all, congratulations to 8 of our own Rotarians on being nominated for this year's 20 Under 40 Awards. It's going to be presented in October. Alec Falkenberg, Julia Haig, Whitney Keeler, Chad Rakowski, Eric Scott, Corey Wolin, Ashley Yoakum, and Jackie Bugai, our incredible executive director. Let's give them another round of applause. And last but not least, congrats to Rotarians, Sherry and Hunt Sears. They won the St. Jude's Dream Home, so congratulations. Our next new member orientation is going to be at their new house. They might give us the old house. We can use that one. All right, perfect. Well, congratulations. All right, so you may have noticed that the stage looks a little bit different today, and this was intentional. As the program committee started the year, they wanted to bring some diversity in the style of presentations we have. So our normal presentation, what you're used to seeing of someone at the podium or someone with a PowerPoint presentation, is what we're sort of referring to as our keynote speech presentation. What you'll see next week is a panel discussion where we have a couple of individuals and a moderator that moderates the discussion. And what we're going to have today is what we're referring to as a fireside chat, where we have a informed expert that interviews another expert in the field. And we undoubtedly have 2 incredible experts today. I am not going to belabor the introduction. One, because I think 75% of the room are guests that came here specifically to hear Pete Kadens. So I feel good like you know who he is. But I will welcome to the stage Reverend John Jones, the CEO of Hope Toledo, and Pete Kadens.
Good morning. Sorry. Good afternoon. So first of all, I'm going to start this with Pete, but first to say to President Kevin, I think it's outstanding, the thought process to have conversations, fireside chats that center around this. So we're really excited that Pete agreed and was able to fit it in his schedule to get over to Toledo. You can't hear me, I'll project like it's yesterday. Get over to Toledo and have this conversation. We're going to talk about a myriad of things which we think are critically important items. But I think what I want to do, for those that may not know who Pete is, just to give a little bit of a backdrop, Pete clearly has a lot of ties to Toledo and to the area, and we'll spend some time talking about that, as was already mentioned by Superintendent Fineski. He's a graduate of Ottawa Hills, grew up in this neck of the woods, still has family here. He and his wife, Amy, left here, went to Bucknell, graduated, moved to Chicago, has been in Chicago raising a family. And I think what is critically important, part of what we'll talk about as well, is his business prowess. So his bio would say he is a serial entrepreneur. And I think that is critically important because of the business aspect that he brings to the table and brings to everything that he walks through. So with that being said, and you can find his bio, read his bio, and work through that. I didn't think we needed to spend all of that time working through Pete's bio. But what I did want to do was to have Pete begin by just sharing a little bit of your background. There's a whole lot of people in this room who have heard of you, have seen the things that you've worked on and are working on and are doing, but I'm not sure how many folks in the room really know you. And so I would love to start with you just giving a background of really who is Pete?
Awesome. Thank you, Reverend. And thanks for the opportunity to be here today. Great to see so many familiar faces and so many people who have made a difference in my life or have really contributed meaningfully to the different initiatives that I've been involved in here in Toledo, and predominantly Hope Toledo. Like John said, product of this community. Father was a professor at UT. Mother was an elected official in Ottawa Hills, and he had a really nice upbringing. Went to Bucknell, as John said. Probably most germane to this audience. Started 6 companies. I took 2 of those companies public. Collectively, between those companies, created about $10 billion in shareholder value, and had about 7,000 employees who worked for me over those years. I retired at the age of 41. So about 5 years ago, and retirement's a little bit of a I guess unique term in this case, because it didn't mean I stopped work. I just worked differently. So I have 3 kids, all school-age kids. I'm a high school basketball coach now. I started an organization called Hope Chicago, which was built on the back of Hope Toledo. It's much larger because, frankly, the need, but also the supply side is much larger in Chicago. We're serving about 5,000 underserved students in Chicago and their families. And the goal is, and Reverend Jones is on our board, the goal is to serve about 30,000 families in Chicago, which would make it the largest urban scholarship program in America. And so, you know, I sort of bob and weave between different projects. I think the thing that I would just end on is the thing that I'm most intrigued by now, and then I started a business. I hired the woman who was the CEO of Uber Eats, and I asked her to build me the biggest marketplace possible of people who have weathered the storm of mental illness and addiction. I asked her to create me an Uber-like marketplace where people who have weathered the storm of mental illness and addiction can provide counsel, support, help to people who are currently going through that storm. Because if you look at the data tells us that only 1 in 9 addicted or mentally ill people will ever be seen by a clinical therapist. We simply do not have enough clinicians in this country to care for addicted and mentally ill. And so that's sort of the biggest thing that I'm working on now in the for-profit side. So I think that's a good introduction, isn't it?
I think it's a good introduction. So with all of those things, here's what I would really want you to dig into the philosophy. So you just mentioned Fellow, right? So that's one of the entities you've just started. But dig into your philosophy around education. What was the impetus that caused you to say, I'm going to come to Toledo, and we're going to create something and see how it grows, and then I'm going to do it again in Chicago? And you're actually having conversations, we are, about what this could potentially look like, you know, around the country. But what is your philosophy around education and helping people?
Yeah, first around helping people, I've learned over time that the more generous I am, the wealthier I get. And in almost every forum where I'm given the opportunity to have a microphone in my hand, I talk about the fact that the more generous I am, the wealthier I get. This is something not foreign to you all as Rotarians. Actually, I was a keynote speaker at the International Rotary event last year, and I am a Paul Harris honor or something. I forget exactly.
Paul Harris Fellow.
A Paul Harris Fellow, yes, I am a Paul Harris Fellow. I just believe that, you know, when I give of myself, and it's not just money, it's time, it's intellect, it's energy, it's connections, and it's money too. When I give of myself in those ways, that, you know, the universe repays me and my family and blesses us. And so that's the first thing, that I've always had a sort of a philanthropic bent, but I just believe that the more generous I am, the wealthier I do get. And the second part is about paying it backward. You know, and so if you're like me, and you're a rich white man, and you made money the way I made money, and I made money in a myriad of different ways, but primarily the vast majority of my fortune comes from building the world's largest cannabis company. It's now about a $5 billion business. And the truth is that people like me didn't build that industry. The truth is that people who were different color skin, different socioeconomic strata, built that industry as entrepreneurs, and instead of finding themselves incredibly wealthy like I did, they found themselves incarcerated and catalyzed into generational poverty. And so if you are in my position, you can't have too much hubris. You got to be able to look in the mirror and say to yourself, something doesn't feel right here. And that's exactly what I said on the day I retired. Like, I got to go back and contribute to the people who suffered so that I could succeed. And the truth is that many of those people reside here in Toledo. They look different than me. They grew up in different neighborhoods than me. They went to different public schools than I did. But there's no intellectual deficiency. There's just an opportunity gap for them. And so that's when I decided I got to go back to these communities. Now, the one thing I did, and this changed everything for me, I went and taught. So my first year out of retirement, I went and taught in the south side of Chicago in Englewood, highest murder rate zip code in the Midwest. I was the only white person in the entire school. That includes faculty and staff. I was a part-time teacher there, but I taught 2 seminars to juniors and seniors. And what I learned by getting super proximate to those students and those families in that moment was there's lots of work to be done, and the work has to be family correlated. In other words, like, what we have done many times in this country is we have created one-generational anomalies. You all are familiar with the term brain drain. You know, we educate these kids, we give them all the tools, and then we send them away from Toledo, and they never come back. So we as a community don't benefit. Well, guess what? That doesn't just happen in Toledo. That happens in bigger cities like Chicago, too, especially with our underserved minority kids. And so what I realized is I needed to bring the parents and the families into this network around education and make culturally normative behaviors around education at that dinner table for that family. And so I learned that by being in the classroom. And that's why I decided that I wanted to come back to Toledo, pay it backward to this community, but also bring the family into this network of education. And the results have sort of speak for themselves. When the family is involved, kids graduate.
So one of the first conversations that Pete and I had, I went over to Chicago, was there for another conference. We had emailed each other. And one of the first questions I asked him, if he remembers, was juxtapose for me. That was literally what I said. Juxtapose for me how you have made a boatload of money in the cannabis industry, and I got kids that I know sitting in jail for a dime bag. That was literally the conversation. And his response, and I can say this without fear of contradiction, was exactly what he just said. So for me, that's a pretty big deal, because that was 6 years ago when I asked him that question, and that's not changed, because that is a core philosophical belief that you cannot do this work unless you, A, get proximate to it and navigate through. So with that being the philosophy, talk a little bit more about this whole concept of Hope Toledo. So for those that may not know, I'm privileged to be able to, and I use that word on purpose, to serve at Hope Toledo, where our mission is to support and ensure high quality education from birth to career. That's preschool, post-secondary, trade school. And the goal is generational economic change, right? And so how do we benefit our families and communities in that way? But when we first talked about Hope, there's a whole lot of fluttering about how is this going to grow? How are we going to start this? So talk a little bit more about this 2-gen idea of doing this work. You've already touched on it, but I need you to dig a little bit deeper on the educational side from what you've seen from a work perspective, employer perspective, that space.
You know, in many of these underserved communities, mom and dad aren't involved in education, but there's a reason why they're not involved in education. It's not as simple as they don't care. And I think that's what some people may think. Members of this community don't care about their kids getting educated. No, it's not true. The truth is that life is incredibly Darwinian. And when one parent might be incarcerated and the other parent is holding up the household and 3 kids or 5 kids and, 2 jobs and, struggling to put food on the table and a roof over their head, it's like, yeah, you don't have time for the dinner table conversation. Mom might be at work during dinner. And so that conversation about education, I don't know about you, but for me, I was blessed with 2 educated parents, and every single dinner table discussion was about school. So it was ingrained in me. It was established. I was going to get good grades, and I was going to go on to college. I knew that. It was an expectation. In many of these homes, there is no launch pad for these kids. The only launch pad is the one they're going to build for themselves and for generations behind them. And so We need to build the launch pad for these kids, but it's best done with a network of people who will support them. No one likes to go to battle alone, right? And I tell you, I mean, like, I put myself in a really uncomfortable position, just being super honest, by being the only white person in that school in the south side of Chicago. And that, my friends, is the way many of our minority students feel every single day on a college campus, because they go alone. And the University of Illinois, our flagship land-grant university, the biggest public institution in the state, a state where 15% of the population is black. Only 2% of the student enrollment at University of Illinois is black. That's a problem. And one of the problems is, by the way, the highest turnover of any demographic at the University of Illinois and almost any college campus outside of HBCUs in America is young black men. They go on a campus, they aren't given some of the tools, they don't have some of the infrastructure and support, and they feel lonely. And it's not an intellectual deficiency, again. And there's some cultural nuances to this. And so, what we found, though, is when we integrate families into the education process and they feel invested in it, they win together. And the data supports this. The data in Toledo and the data in Chicago shows that when usually mom and son, or mom and daughter, not always, but I think it's traditionally mom, goes to college at the same time as son or daughter, and they're in it together, they win and they graduate and they persist. In the city of Chicago, 13% of our young black men who graduate from CPS, Chicago Public Schools, 13% of them go on to get a college degree. Now tell me this, in a city that's almost 40% black, how in the world are you going to grow and scale and solve these intractable issues when only 13% of that population is going on to get a post-secondary education? You're always going to struggle. So to me, and we have similar metrics here, only about 18% of Toledos have a college degree. I don't know if you know that. It's among the lowest numbers in the country. In Toledo, you all compare to Biloxi, Mississippi, in terms of the number of the population of people who actually have gone on to get a 4-year degree. And that's not something we wear as a badge of honor as Toledoans. And it's something we can do something about, which is the exciting part. So I've seen these kids and these families succeed together, have fun together. So it doesn't always work out, but what we're seeing in Chicago and what we're seeing in Toledo is, on the whole, about 70% of these students will go to college and graduate. 70%. Benchmark that to the national average of a black student who goes to college. Only about 40% of them will ever graduate from a 4-year degree. So we're almost doubling, the performance of a traditional black student.
And typically that graduation happens in 6, 7, or 8 years. So let's go back in time. January 29th, 2020. You stand in Scott High School field house. I see Dr. Duran out here in the audience. You stand in Scott Jessup Wakeman Scott's field house, Benny Williams field house to be exact. And you make this huge announcement, and everybody's yelling. The band is there. We're coming off a Bulldog weekend now, so Scott Bulldog fans are there. Everybody's there. It's a wonderful day. We're all excited. Dr. Smith gets families together in February. They are talking through how they're going to navigate this. And then the first week of March happens. COVID shutters us in. And I'm not sure if you remember this, but you called me towards the end of March and said, "How are you doing?" Doing like everybody else is doing. I'm in my basement. How about that, right?
With a bow tie on, though. A bow tie and underwear.
Only for the camera, right? Bow tie up, right? Come on. So we had this conversation, and I said, well, what are you willing to do? Talk about your thought process of still sticking with this program in March of 2020, when most people were packing up their bags and saying, we got to shutter this down because we don't know what tomorrow's going to look like. Talk about your mentality, because you said one word to me and you were like, I'm still in.
Yeah. And, you know, and we've had moments not quite as black swan of moments as we did in COVID, but we've had similar moments of sort of pivot points and tough decisions in Chicago, too, where, you know, the funding was sort of drying up. I will tell you, after October 7th, you know, Hope Chicago is an organization, folks, that has to raise like $50 million a year to give you a sense of scale. This is a lot of money to raise every single year to continue to support this. And after October 7th, you know, a lot of our donors in Chicago, the bigger donors, do happen to be of the Jewish faith, and we saw a lot of our funding dry up. And our CEO said to me, she said, "What are we going to do?" And I said, you know, same thing I said to John, we will not lose, because we can't. This is a moral imperative, if anything, and it's really more like it's a societal imperative. Like, we don't have, if we want this to be a majestic city, we have to get our families educated. We don't have a choice. We cannot lose. We will borrow, we will steal, we will do whatever we need to do.
I'm not stealing.
Not stealing. Not stealing. Stealing in a good way.
Stealing in a good way.
Yeah, yeah,
Pete's
yeah.
going back to
Yeah.
Chicago.
Little
I have
like
to
a
live here. I'm not
Robin Hood
stealing.
type of thing. A Robin Hood type.
I
But
love marauders.
you know, we will do whatever we have to do to make sure we perpetuate the educational opportunities of these students and these families. Like, we can't lose. And you know, I look at look. I made some mistakes when I came here to Toledo originally. I wish I'd done it a little bit differently. Hindsight's 20/20. You grow up, even in your 40s, you grow up. You know, I came to this platform and I made it, you know, too much about me, and you know, I think that I would have done it a little bit softer, a little bit less threatening, you know, a little bit more coalition building than I did it, you know, prior, and maybe we'd be more successful. But you know, here's what I'll just say about what we're facing now as a city. And when I say we, I'm saying Toledoans, even though most people don't consider me Toledoan anymore. I will happily wear that badge of honor. I still consider myself a Toledoan. And, you know, what we have to realize in these cities like Toledo and Chicago is there is no such thing as addition by division. None. Like, we can be divided. We can decide that, you know, we're going to, you know, I'm going to support this, and they're going to support this, and we're all going to do our different things. But at the end of the day, if we want this to be a great city and we want our kids to have equal opportunity, we cannot be divided. We must be unified in how we approach educating our families. If there's one thing we should all agree on, it's like, our kids deserve the chance to learn. And they should do it cost effectively, not saddled with hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. So I just believe that these sorts of initiatives like Hope Toledo and Hope Chicago should be rallying points for all of us to come together and try and make sure that we're in this together. And this isn't just a pitch to go donate to Hope Toledo. I truly believe that at my core. If we don't do this in Toledo and Chicago and all these other cities around the country, this is going to be a majority-minority country in 15 years. We're in trouble. We got to get on it now.
So, so with that said, can you speak to, from a Chicago perspective, and I hope nobody in this room thinks that I'm trying to say this, so I'm going to put a caveat with this. By no means is Toledo Chicago. I am of the belief, lifer, born, raised, I'm of the belief that it is the craziest thing in the world when people say, oh, I wish we were like Chicago or other cities. I think that is a pure fallacy. We need to be the best Toledo we can be. We can't be the best Chicago. We can't be the best any of those places. We need to be the best Toledo. But with that said, there are some things that are similarities or corollaries or whatever it is that you can draw between the two, and you've seen both. Can you talk about some of the differences, if I can put it that way, differences you've seen between both of us operating and how we've operated, and where we can be better, both ends, right?
Yep.
Where we can be better in this space.
I've seen, the purview to the perch to see what's happening on a smaller scale here in Toledo and Chicago is a really unique perch, and it's one that I've benefited from immensely. And I would say, look, many of the intractable issues that exist in Toledo also exists in Chicago, just at scale, right? We have an abundance of poverty. We have commerce deserts, pharmacy deserts. We have an undereducated and underemployed minority community in both cities. Lots of the same issues, just, different types of scale. I would say that some of the differences, and again, I've learned my lessons that I can't just come into these forums and sort of, be a jerk about this, and I don't want to be a jerk about this. I want to be super nice and constructive so that we all get better. The truth is the Chicago corporate community has been more engaged. I don't know why that is. I think there's a heightened degree of Chicago pride, even though we have our own problems. I think there's a lot of pride in Chicago. It's a pretty majestic city. And the corporate community has come to the table big to support our initiatives. I think that the corporate community in Chicago, Chicago is obviously a big draw for all these kids are coming out of college, especially in the Midwest and Big Ten schools. They all move to Chicago, right? And so Chicago corporations kind of know that, if we don't invest in the youth, which is our human capital pool, our talent pool, we're not going to get access to them. So companies like Walgreens, like BMO Bank, like Wintrust Bank, like Winston & Strawn, a big white shoe law firm in Chicago, Northern Trust, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, McDonald's, Aldi. I mean, these are all seven-figure donors to what we're doing in Chicago. To me, off the top of my head, that's the biggest difference. I've seen the corporate community really engage and really believe that if they don't engage with us, who is the largest source of underserved minority educational talent in the city now, that they're going to miss out on opportunities to employ great people somewhere down the road. And so they want to be involved. They want to be volunteering. It's not just money, by the way. It's volunteering. It's being in our big events and meeting with the kids and mingling and writing thank you notes and doing all this other stuff. So I would say that's difference number one. I would say difference number two, fortunately, unfortunately, we have a bigger staff in Chicago, a much bigger staff in Chicago. We have about,
amen.
Yeah, we have about,
and we got a super lean, mean team here in Toledo.
Yeah, the team is awesome here in Toledo. But when you have 40 people, you can do a lot more from a programming perspective when you have 6, and so one of the other big differences that it strikes me is that we have used our leverage in Chicago, and I'm not sure we've leveraged enough here in Toledo. Maybe that's because of the size, but we've done a good job, sort of, I would say, imposing our will on our university partners. Like, you want our kids? That's a blessing if you get our kids. And so you're going to pay, and you're going to pay dearly, or else you're not going to get our kids because you're not going to be part of our program. Because the reason is, guys, is that, University of Illinois does not recruit in Englewood. They are not going to send their recruiters in Englewood. Again, there were more murders in Englewood, a kind of an interesting slice of a neighborhood in Chicago, than there were in the rest of the city combined last year. It's a very, very violent community. And so, no, they will not send their recruiters there. So they don't even know about these kids. They'll never have access to this immense talent. But we leverage that because they know that they're going to get them through us. And we're going to send them 40 or 50 or 60 of them. One of the things that the schools, the campuses in Illinois agree to that I do not think they agree to here in Ohio is because of our negotiating leverage. They must have a full-time employee, the University of Illinois and all of our other campuses, must have a full-time employee who is dedicated, whose only job is to dedicate to retaining our scholars. That's their only job. And must be employed by the university, paid by the university. They must be a licensed clinical social worker. And their only job is to keep these kids there and to let them know that there's someone there who loves them and is there for them in a tough time. Because, by the way, the mental illness on college campuses, you think the mental illness in sort of the, large sort of ambient, America is bad. Mental illness on college campuses is crazy. And there's like 2 or 3 social workers per campus. So, to have that person dedicated to them is a big deal. And one last thing, John, I would say, I don't know, sometimes the sort of the ethos in Chicago is much more like patriotic, like much more, everyone wants Chicago to win, I feel like. And I'm not saying that Toledoans don't want Toledo to win. I just feel like there's a little more glue and stickiness that I've seen in Chicago when it comes to philanthropy than perhaps there is in Toledo.
So I'm going to pivot, but I'm also going to say, because I'm watching my clock, so if folks have questions, you can begin to move towards the mic. But I am going to pivot real quick. I've got two things to touch on. One, let me just say towards your differences, because I think those are really good ones. We have great university partners, so I want to make sure, and Pete knows that, so he's not throwing shade at local university partners. So between University of Toledo, Lourdes University, Bowling Green State University, Owens Community College, Mercy College, those are our big connectors here locally. And they have stepped up in various ways to do so. So again, scale matters. Chicago, 5 schools, you're talking 5,000 kids. We right now are still only working with Jessup Wakeman Scott High School. So that makes a big difference. We can't go to the University of Toledo and say, hire a person to work with our Hope Scholars when there's 27, 30, 35, I think, something like that, 35 scholars sitting there right now. We can't go to them and say, hire a person just for our Hope Scholars. At Chicago, where they have 150 kids at one university, they can have that conversation. So scale does matter. So I wanted to say that. 2, as we're pivoting, talk on the business side. You've had lots of success. You've had some bumps, right? How have those built you to this latest endeavor that you're entering into around Fellow, right? But talk more on the business side of how you've created this, because obviously you sit there, I think you dream about this stuff at night and you just start writing stuff and then you wake up and say, I'm going to do it. Different conversation for another day, but talk about the business side of this current venture that you're in, but how does that inform how you just operate, period?
Yeah. John, thanks for the cleanup on the mess.
That was not cleanup on aisle 4.
And I will say our university partners here have been amazing. In fact, I keep very close tabs on a young man who goes to Lourdes, and he's one of my best friends. In fact, I'm going to see him right after this before I head out of town. Interesting data point, just real quickly. This gentleman, his name is Chris Rowland, and he went to Scott, and he's now enrolled at Lourdes as a sophomore. And he said to me one day, he was at my house, and I live in a pretty nice house on Lake Michigan, and he's looking at my house, and he's looking at the lake, he's looking at my pool, and he said, Pete, one day my goal is to have one of these, a pad like this. And I said, Chris, that's an awesome goal. I said, how are you going to do that? He said, Pete, I'm going to be a police chief. And I said, Chris, I'm so glad you said that, and I want you to understand something called economic relativity. And I wasn't trying to be mean to him or whatever, but it just reminded me of like sort of the learning that has to happen that far exceeds just the classroom. He really didn't understand that someone who's a government official may not be able to afford a very nice home on Lake Michigan, and so there's lots of work that needs to be done with these kids that that far transcends some of the classroom stuff, and that's what we're doing in Hope Chicago and in Hope Toledo. As it relates to the business, look, I'm a severe dyslexic, and I'm probably ADD too, and so I sort of like bob and weave between projects, and I don't have that great of attention span. But what I'm really, really good at is the first 30 yards of any entrepreneurial journey. If you paint sort of the the life cycle of a business on a 100-yard football field, I'll take me in the first 30 yards versus almost anybody. When we start to get to midfield, I suck. When we get to the other side of midfield, I'm worse than so. You don't want me on your team. But those first 30 yards are about building a team of top-ticking talent, identifying people that aren't just the most talented, but also work together well in symbiosis and in chemistry. And I am very, very good at sort of identifying great people, not micromanaging them, telling them not telling them how to do their job, just saying, hey, I trust you, go out and do it. And I've made a lot of money doing that. And I also feel like I just have the good fortune to bring a sense of discipline to business. The one business where I didn't act like an entrepreneur was a pizza restaurant. I spent money like I was rich, and that was the one failure. And every other business, including this latest one, I'm going to act like I'm scrapping 2 pennies together to try and build this thing. Because I think that discipline, spending, and rigor of sort of like thinking of this as a very grassroots, sort of thing is the best way to build a successful business over the long term.
It's really good. I don't know if this group has questions.
We're going to swap microphones around. If you've got questions, bring them to the floor, and I will try to keep us on time.
Hi there. So I know that you did like the money for those in high school to go to college and then with their parent. How are you getting the parents involved at that young age though? Because if they have 2 jobs, or how are you able to do that if they can't sit at the dinner table? So I'm curious what you're doing at the young age of with their parent or guardian.
Right. Thank you. And I think the answer is, I think you've worked with us on our projects, haven't you, before? I'm sorry.
I don't think I
Oh,
have.
okay, my bad. It was confusing for someone else.
I mean, I know John, but hey.
Yes, John's a good man. They're doing a much better job of that in Toledo than we are in Chicago. Kudos to John and his team. They sort of have created this barbell of like, we support early childhood development and education. Presumably you all know, you live in a city where over 80% of the students are not kindergarten ready. And that's something that Hope Toledo and TPS and Dr. Duran and his team are actively working very, very hard on, because that's an issue we all have to grapple with. But John and Hope Toledo do have an early childhood component, and in fact, it's a real focus for them. And so they're engaging the families starting at age 3, 4 in preschool. We are not doing that in Chicago. The reason we're not doing that is because it's just size and scale. Don't have the resources to help. But if I had all the money in the world, I would start engaging parents very early. There's a case study in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where they started engaging parents in preschool. And the net result of those kids as they got into college, this is 20 years ago, was incredible. So we have to do a better job of engaging our families earlier. And here in Hope, here in Toledo, you guys are doing a pretty good job of that. Thank you.
Thank you both so much for the time and the insight that you've provided. One thing, Pete, that you mentioned that was a little bit staggering to me, and I've been pretty close getting the opportunity to learn about Hope Toledo and volunteer a bit. You mentioned the 7-figure donors from Chicago. Knowing and watching, being a part of the Hope Toledo focus, how can we as Rotarians, as community members, as business leaders, as nonprofit leaders, how can we be a part of the solution to create something that's sustainable, that creates generational impact in Toledo?
Yeah, I think that there's a case study that David Brooks, the journalist in the New York Times, has talked about, and it's from the Tamarack Institute in Canada, where over a period of 3 years, the Tamarack Institute worked with 8 cities in Canada, and they reduced poverty by 35% in 3 years. And how do they do it? They did it through a platform called Collective Impact, where they got all the key decision makers at the table. No one was playing turf wars. No one was being provincial about their money or their time or their sort of, trying to win political points. Everyone just agreed, if we don't step up and work together now in collaboration and symbiosis, we're screwed. And so getting, all those people at the table agreeing in lockstep that we should do this, I think makes sense. One idea I've given the mayor, and he's pirated it from me, which is great, I like that, I told him, I said, Wade, we should get 100 people or 100 corporations, whatever you want, and each commit $50,000 a year for the next 5 years. That's $5 million a year. Then that money should be divided across 5 to 10 charities in this community who can really stand to benefit. And if it doesn't seem like that big of a give, 50,000 for many people in this community could probably afford that. But we can change lives if 4 or 5 charities who are focused on our youth are getting $1 million to $2 million a year. That goes a long way in this community. So I wish that sort of consensus building and collective impact could happen here.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the good job that Hope Toledo is doing with early childhood education. One of the things I've seen in some literature is high schools are not preparing students properly for college, so they get to college, they don't have the skills, they fail. Do you see a role for your foundation in making the high schools more effective, whether that is through school choice or some other way of making sure that the family and the child have the best choice of where to go to get an education.
You're not wrong. There have been many examples where we've seen our kids, both in Chicago and Toledo, but I'm primarily talking about Chicago now, be ill prepared for what's to come on a college campus. And that does set us back. And so, yes, we need to be creating more opportunities for students in the secondary level. And one of the things Dr. Durant is doing, and I really respect, and we're not doing as good of a job here in Chicago, is mapping what happens in the secondary process and the high school process to career options. You know, and we got to get way better at that. We have to match the curricular approach in high school to what these students want to do after their education is over. You know, if you want to go to the police academy, you do not need to go to Ohio State University. You know, you can go to Owens Community and get a criminal justice degree and go right into the academy when you're 21 here. And that's probably what you should do. But we're not doing a very good job of that in communities around the country. And so, yes, we need to invest more in that curricular approach and mapping the curricular approach to career interests over time. Thank you.
This is slightly anecdotal, but as someone who is one generation away from abject poverty, substance abuse problems, and mental health issues, my mother had access to education, which allowed me to then attend university. But because of her lack of access to mental health support, both myself and other siblings, our ability to finish university kind of fell apart. Can you explain what other services you're providing rather than just access to education, but resources that might, go into mental health aspects?
Right. I always say to people, and I've said this on 60 Minutes when Scott Pelley asked me a similar question. The truth is that sending kids to, underserved students to college with a boatload of scholarship cash and hoping they'll succeed is a fool's errand. Doesn't work like that. Won't ever work. Many people have tried it. And so we need to be surrounding these kids with love and attention and help them overcome their traumas. You know, in Chicago, we do something. We spend 1 week with every scholar. It's called Goal Getters. And we bring in all of our corporate partners. But if you want to be a Hope Scholar, you have to sit there for a week. And you have to talk about your issues, your potentially mental health issues. You have to learn how to budget your stipend. You have to learn how to read a college syllabus. Something that is kind of an underestimated tool. You know, if syllabus says 40% of the class is college participation, you better show up at class or you're going to fail. So, yeah, we're surrounding these kids with love. Also, many of our kids have mentors, or they're supposed to have mentors. All of our students in Chicago, I don't know what the rules are here in Toledo, but all of our students in Chicago must show up within the first 10 days of every single semester and meet with their Hope advisor. Must, because we know this for sure. The first 10 days of every semester are the hardest 10 days of that kid's life. Mentally, physically, just the change in cultural norms. And so, yeah, we are doing a good job surrounding these kids with love and attention, but we got to do a better job. You have to invest in these school children and their families, or else it will not work.
Pete, thanks very much. First of all, you've brought a renewed energy in this room that I haven't seen in a long time, so that's great. Thank you for that. Second, you spoke a little bit about some of the statistics. 1 in 9 people actually get to see a therapist. And as a husband of a social worker, can you describe to me some ideas of the economics on how we can make it a livable situation for someone with a master's in social work to actually get paid what they're needed in work?
Yeah, I think you could argue that. Thank you.
One.
I think you could argue that job is priceless. But that type of work and teaching, obviously, those people should be paid as much as possible. But in a reality where that's not possible, what I'm trying to do and I'm trying to figure out is how do we monetize help? How do we monetize support? If you can monetize your car via Uber and you can monetize your dwelling via Airbnb, why can't you monetize your life experiences? There are 650,000 people out there who are sponsors at AA. And my belief is that those people can help a lot more people than those who just sit in that room at AA. Because those people have already acknowledged they need support. What about all the other addicts around this country or people who are mentally ill who haven't quite acknowledged it or are still in denial? And so I think we were creating a platform. We pay our fellows, it's the name of my new company, Fellow, F-E-L-L-O, $56 an hour. which I think is a pretty good living wage. That's $117,000 a year. And so I think we are going to have no choice but to invest in subclinical support for our mentally ill and our addicted, and that our social workers and our clinicians are going to need to be lifted up as well in terms of compensation.
Just real quick, just to add, I know President Kevin, it's time to go. I just want to thank everybody who took the time to show up. Part of my purpose for today, when President Kevin asked, is that I've had the privilege to sit and have conversations like this with Pete on a regular basis. And not everybody has had that opportunity. And I think in some ways, he already said it. I didn't have to say it. He said it. It may have come off a different way for some folks, and they're like, Pete doesn't know what he's doing. Pete's going to come here, and he's not going to give back. He's not going to do this, that, and the other. He's not going to pay all the money he said he was going to pay. He has done everything that he committed to doing from the beginning, plus some. And so part of my space is because, number one, I love this dude like a brother. Number two, I want the community to understand the thought process that he goes through to navigate through this. So I'm really appreciative, President Kevin. Thank you for this time. Thank you for all of you who showed up. And Pete, thank you for being here.
John, thank you for leading this. Pete, thank you for being here. I will say, John, I was one of those people that when I see the headlines, when I see what Pete's doing, it's hard for me not to say, I think he's missing something here, right? But to hear from you, to hear your passion and what you're doing, I appreciate you sharing that. And there's a lot of things about you that I didn't know, that I wouldn't see in the headlines, that I wouldn't read in the articles, to show your commitment. So thank you. Appreciate you being here. In appreciation for your presentation, we have a book for you called Historical Tales of Toledo that was authored by a past member of our club, Clint Mock. And you talked about focus and commitment, and in 1978, Rotary International said we are going to eradicate polio. And so that has been a focus for Rotary clubs across the world. Since then, we're going to make a donation in your name to the Polio Plus Fund to officially eradicate polio from the world. And so we appreciate you being here. Thank you very much. Our program committee is just getting started. We've got some great programs coming up I want to make you guys aware of. On August 19th, we will have the presidents of the public universities in Northwest Ohio, UT, BG, and Owens, are going to speak on a panel regarding the state of public higher education here in Northwest Ohio. On August 26th, and I know he's in the room, Bill Bissett, president of Lourdes University, will join Jim Pollack of Junior Achievement and talk about innovations in education, specifically the fifth-year program that they're collaborating on. There is no meeting on Labor Day, but then we are back September 9th. Mac Driscoll will join us and talk about how zoning creates economic impact. So really some incredible things. As we close, I'd like to invite all of you to attend this week's happy hour. We are at Casual Pint Thursday, so stop out. Happy hour can start as early as you want it to, just let us know. And it can go as late as you want it to. Just let Stephanie know so they can keep the doors open for you. There are two committee meetings this afternoon. Membership committee is in Summit A. Community Services is in Summit B. And did I get that right? Yeah, membership in A, community services in B. And with that, make it a great day. We are adjourned.